Imagine, the year is 1994. You are watching one of the most massive shows of the time, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. You go, I'm an adult, maybe this is a bit too childish for me, but you're sucked in. But then you ask yourself the question, this is good and all, but what if I wrote a fan fiction about one of these characters being tortured to death by the villain? And with that, you have one of the most infamous fan fictions of all time, and one of the proto-disturbing fanfics. Hi guys, so come with Pongo here, and today I'm going to do a deep dive into Agony in Pink. So I guess for those not in the know, Agony in Pink is an extremely famous, disturbing fanfiction, and one of the earliest ones. Obviously, I think when we think disturbing fanfics, we think of stuff from like the mid-2000s and late 2000s, you know, your hat fics, your milk fics. But this one was published in 1994, literally during the airing of the second season of Power Rangers. So this person, you know, like, he didn't wait a minute. They had their finger on the pulse, they saw this, and they immediately went, I need to make this right now. So before somebody asks me, Pongo, this could just be a parody, like, this could just be someone joking around. I literally do not believe this is a joke, man. Like, they made this for the love of the game. And as well, just wild that a grown adult in 1994 was watching Power Rangers, and his takeaway other than, I don't know, either just being like, oh, this is cool, I enjoy this, or like, oh, what a great show for kids, was I need to write a story about the villain torturing one of the main characters to death so I can get my rocks off. And that's another thing too, this absolutely was written for his own sexual pleasures. And originally it was posted on a website called sex.stories. So I think we know, you know, his true intention behind this, which just wild to me. It's also just so funny in the early internet, your websites would just be called something like that. I just can't imagine something being called that today. But I guess at some point the user base just got way too freaky because this website was taken down, and this website then later got re-uploaded to a website called Deja.com. If you search it now, it just takes you to Google Groups for some reason, which is interesting. But yeah, I guess this late 90s internet, you know, news group does not exist anymore. So sad. But yeah, this story was so controversial, they ended up in the Australian news due to parental groups and censorship boards finding this story among other shocking stories posted on this news group Deja.com, and they were worried about not only children reading this stuff, but whether or not these kind of stories were even suitable for adults to read it. They made a move to push through a ban of like pornography on news group sites, as well as just like removing the page that hosted this story in particular. But you may ask, can it be that bad? Can it? No, it absolutely is. I've read this story now. Well, I read it originally once, and now I'm reading it. I read it again, skimming through for this video, and I can tell you it absolutely is. So this fanfiction starts off with its author, the Dark Ranger. Great name, telling us that this story is much stronger than the other Power Ranger stories that they've read on the site, and that any other dark stories about the Rangers were a little too nice for them, you know. His story, it's darker, it's edgier. I mean, this is super goofy for multiple reasons. You know, I can't exactly knock the Dark Ranger, because I've read a lot of disturbing fanfics, and this might be one of the worst ones I've read. Genuinely, this is a really, really bad one, so Maybe they were on the money. He then tells us this story is about the Kimberly, the Pink Ranger, being tortured by Lord Zed, and then goes on to explain the lore of Power Rangers to those not in the know, I guess. So anybody out there that doesn't know Power Rangers lore, they explained it for you. So there you go, man. Then he goes on to give us a content warning. So I guess that's nice of him, you know. He's not just throwing us in the deep end. He then tells us it won't be to everybody's taste, which is very much an understatement. I don't think this is really to anybody's tastes, maybe a few people's tastes in particular. He also tells us that because the monsters are made of rubber, the story is not realistic, but will still be upsetting. The level of detail of torture this person goes into would still be upsetting to the majority of people, irregardless of, you know, whether or not the monster is some goofy rubber monster from Power Rangers. So our story starts with Lord Zed fed up with constantly getting nay-nayed by the Power Rangers, discovering the concept of torture by accidentally tuning into an NPR discussion about torture by Amnesty International. I can't believe I'm saying these words out loud. Just the concept of that alone is hilarious. He then gets the putties to collect all the literature on torture for him, so he can create a torture monster similar to how in the show he'd like shock a feather with his big staff and it'd create like a big bird monster, but with this is a bunch of books about torture, I guess. Also, apparently, the monster he creates is multicolored, like freaking Elmer the Elephant, because he's made of multiple books, and he has human hands, which, considering Power Rangers, you know, most monsters just have these weird little goofy rubber hands. It would be really odd looking. He then decides, you know, of all the Rangers that he's going to torture, he wants to pick Kimberly as his subject for torture. Because the author's horny for her. I mean, sorry. Lord Zed is horny for her. And then we get some dialogue that would make the worst male authors describing women jealous. He really going in there talking about her ample bosom. I want to die. Kimberly then gets kidnapped by the good old putties, but not before the author weirdly describes her again, especially describe her getting out of the shower, so we know where the intentions lie. The story then gets into what makes up the majority of this fanfiction, which is Torturer, the torture monster, torturing Kimberly. Say that 5 times fast, it's like Peter Piper. While the writer writes with one hand and describes Kimberly in the grossest ways possible. I mean, literally it is. It's just him talking about how beautiful her body looks. And, you know, again, it's clearly, you know, man is just beating away as he's writing. He constantly describes her thoughts too, which are just endlessly depressing. Like, we're going from him describing his weird fat material to essentially just Kimberly just pleading for help and thinking that at any moment the Rangers are going to come and save her. Which, you know, spoiler alert, does not happen. And then after that, it just whips back to Dark Rangers jerk-off material, so that's fun. The story does take a detour at one point to show us the Rangers in their base as Zordon pretty much is like, Rangers! Kimberly's being fucking tortured, yo! And showing what Lord Zed is doing to Kimberly, and it makes sure to mention that all the male Rangers got erections. I really want to die reading this. This is so gross and creepy. Almost all of the dialogue as well is Torturer just saying the cringiest bad guy shit. It's like I'm watching August Underground again. And they won't even... They're like, again, this stuff is so goofy. The show wouldn't even say this kind of dialogue. It's that bad. And it's like so fucking weird too, because as well, all of Kimberly's dialogue is just all caps, like fucking variations of her going, I'll stop, aye. And it's like... Obviously, the story is horrible, but it does, you know, just take you out a minute because it's just the same thing being repeated over and over again. Also, the dude's clearly a foot guy because most of the torture that isn't just outright disturbing stuff all seems to involve Kimberly's feet and her armpits. Like, man just will not stop talking about her feet and how her feet are, like, supple and young. I'm just saying these words out loud makes me, like, literally, like, want to throw up in my mouth and feel like this guy should be put on a list. It wouldn't be a gross, horny story without the monster having a huge member, let's say that. That's blue, apparently. So I'm just imagining, like, when you roll blue tack in your hands for too long and you make, like, a really long blue tack thing. I'm imagining that's what he's got down there. There's also a bit where Kimberly, like, mid-torture tells Lord Zed that, like, you know what, it's fine, I'll quit being a ranger, like, you know, I don't care anymore, just please stop, I'll quit being a ranger. He, like, tells her, I'll let you go, don't worry about it, and as he's wheeling her away, he accidentally, he wheels her through another door, which leads to the torture chamber. So, one, I'm just thinking architecturally, I had no clue how that works, but two, like, what is this fake gotcha moment, like, this freaking, like, pulling the rug out from underneath her, like, the story's awful, and maybe I'm laughing a bit too much, maybe it's just my coping mechanism for how fucking depressing and awful most of the story is. There's also this line in particular where Zed is taunting the Rangers about how he's on the screen telling them, like he's hacked into their base, that obviously if they don't quit being Rangers, they'll suffer the same fate as Kimberly. And he just says this one line that's too fucking funny, where he's just like, look how Torturer treats the lovely Kimberly's fingers. Imagine what he'd do to your penises and balls, eh? What? How do you write that without bursting out fucking laughing? I can't read that without bursting out laughing. It's too fucking stupid and funny, and if that's meant to be like scary or depressing. I mean, like, you failed on that part, man. So after, about 6 chapters of Kimberly just being horrifically tortured over and over and over again in long detail, it just ends with Kimberly being tortured to death just as the Rangers actually manage to find Zed's coordinates. So it's, it's one of those classic, you get there but just not in time moments. And Zed shows them what he did to their friend, and they all freak out, including Alpha 5 uttering his very inappropriate catchphrase, ay ay ay, which is what he says in the show when he's, confused or scared. But he lets out an extra long one, it says, because of how horrific is what he saw. And again, it's one of these moments that would make me think this is parody, but then the torture moments are so detailed that, like, clearly that is not the case. Like, clearly this dude loves that, but it's just, he just doesn't know how to keep a thematic tone, and it's really funny in a horrible way. So, yeah, like, after that, Zordon just kind of responds in the most heartless way, being like, oh, well, guess we need a new Pink Ranger, and it's like, dog, what? She just got tortured there, what's wrong with you? And of course, the rest of the gang aren't happy about that. So then he just tells them, like, I'll go home and rest, and if when you come back you don't want to be Ranger anymore, that's fine. I'll just get some other kids. So that's pretty awful. The story then ends with a cliffhanger asking us if this is the end of the Power Rangers and if Lord Zed has won. It then tells us to stay tuned for the sequel. The sequel never came though, so we did get a special edition granted of Agony and Pink, which adds in a first chapter of a direct sequel to Agony and Pink, because he did make a sequel called Agony and Pink 2, but it's pretty much just the first story again, but this time it's Kat, the second Pink Ranger from Power Rangers, teaming up with Lord Zed and Rita to torture Kimberly, and it kind of just has Kat taking the role of torturer. So it's pretty much just the same thing again, just with like control find torturer and replacing it with like Kat. It's very stupid. In the special edition of Agony and Pink, he, Dark Ranger addresses the fact that he never finished more than like a chapter of the sequel fan fiction. So he just said that he couldn't really think of anything else to write, and it wasn't really the direction he wanted to go in. And considering this first chapter of this aborted sequel fan fiction is a lot more lighter and positive in tone, and I think that's it. It kind of comes across like Dark Ranger just didn't know how to write something that wasn't just purely torture based. So yeah, the sequel chapter essentially features the then current lineup of Rangers from the show. So noticing the new Pink Ranger, Kat, has been kidnapped, and Tommy and Billy explain what happened to Kimberly and how apparently the gang threw her remains in front of a train to make people think she died in a train accident. But yeah, a bunch of the members leave during, I think, the 3rd season. So he's now implying in he's making Agony and Pink, lore accurate, and saying that when they left in the show, it was because they couldn't deal with what happened to Kimberly. So now the new gang are gonna fight Zed and get Kat back before obviously the same thing happens to her that happened to Kimberly. Now again, it's still very much lingering on the whole idea of this Pink Ranger being tortured, but at least it does have a lot more optimistic and upbeat feel to it, because it does show the Rangers being a lot more active to kind of save Kat than in the original, where they just kind of sat around and were like, we gotta do something, let's try and find him, and then didn't really do anything else. So yeah, as I said before, after that the author just wanted to make Agony and Pink 2. It's clear you couldn't keep a tortured dog down, and he just wanted to clearly make the exact same story again and again. Dark Ranger posted 4 stories while they were active on the internet, and again, one of them was Agony and Pink, the second one was just Agony and Pink again. After that, he published 2 other stories that weirdly enough were not Power Rangers related, so I guess he was trying to move past that Dark Ranger name. One of these was another torture fan fiction, so he didn't go too far for the tree. But this time it was about Princess Leia being tortured by Darth Vader. So, clearly this weird theme of young women being tortured by weird, creepy, old, evil dudes in suits was clearly his thing. And then one more torture story, but this one was original. It wasn't based on anything pre-existing. About a lady named Holly being tortured in a home invasion attempt by a group of lesbians. So that's something. the homophobia and misogyny in that is through the roof, but hey, that is something that he did. And then after that, he didn't post any more fan fiction. Just as quickly as Dark Ranger entered our world, he left after he filled it with his horrific stories. You know, he filled it with his stories, and then he just went out. He went. I found a few threads on Reddit where I was able to find most of the information for this video, and most of the recent stuff you find on there is like some people report that one of their emails was active at least till the early 2000s, and that in the early 2000s people tried to contact them, but they didn't really get anywhere, to no avail. But again, I think it's just that issue of like, it's not, look, we can't even find the person that did My Immortal, and that was like in the mid 2000s. Whereas like, this is early internet, you know, like the mid to late 90s. I mean, like again, like I said, there have been a couple attempts on Reddit to see if they lurk any of the Power Rangers subreddits, and trying to see if they could get them to come out of hiding to do an AMA. But again, like, all of these have just failed. And to be fair, like, the news article about their story being banned off Australian internet was published around 97, at least from the Wayback Machine version of it. So my prevailing theory in regards to this is that most likely the Dark Ranger, they saw like their story getting banned. They saw this news story about their story getting banned, the website that was like hosting it getting banned, and just more than likely just got scared and probably decided to dip from the internet. I mean, in their special edition intro, they love playing into their original story's infamy. I think there's a big difference between, you know, being infamous to a bunch of anonymous people on the internet in your fandom or just in your space than there is being infamous and under the threat of an arrest or fine from the police for writing these stories. Police could reveal who he is, and maybe he could get fired or whatever, or like his family could find out. I think that was probably where the fear came, and probably why they stepped off the internet. The Occam's razor answer is that they probably just grew out of writing these stories. And again, I think that's what's really odd to me. Like, just to think out there, all of my Australian viewers, or just any Australians watching this, that this person probably just went about their life, and they could be anybody walking down the street near you. I think it's just so funny how the Dark Ranger states in their special edition that back in the day, many thought this fanfiction was a hoax. Even a lot of the spin-off fanfics that people made, because of course this blew up in the fandom, it was really popular, so people started making either their own ones where there was like an Agony in yellow, or someone made it with Trini the Yellow Ranger, and as well people started making parody ones where it's like Agony in red and green, where it's like Tommy and Jason. I'm pretty sure Agony in red has like Jason shoving a cactus up his butt. Like, it's just kind of stuff like that. But even these don't exist anymore. Again, these are purely just what I read from speculation online and from bad fan wiki posts. Because of the early internet, like, so many websites have just been lost to time with just being shutting down because the person couldn't afford to keep the domain up anymore, or just ISPs shutting these websites down for their content. Although the Dark Ranger is gone, their legacy has lived on. There will always be weirdos on the internet. I will say Agony Pig is an awful story, and I do not recommend in any way that you read it. So I guess that's where the trail ends, with this odd insight into someone's horrible fantasy. And hopefully, you know, your mental state didn't deteriorate as much as mine as I did researching this. Dark Ranger, if you're out there and somehow this is the one thing out of all these Reddit threads that you do communicate with, you are one weird fucking person. If you want to read it, it's out there, but I would not recommend it, because it is just a horrible, awful, gross, very questionable piece of fiction. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did like the video, you know, leave a like, leave a comment, remember to subscribe, and hit that bell notification, and you'll get a notification every time I upload. I upload weekly, so I hope you guys enjoy your weekend. Comfy Pongo out.